Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic: Jungle Love, Courtship Rituals in the Wild. Presented by Nat Hab Expedition Leader Conan Dumenil. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you for being here with us today. Take it away, Conan.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Thanks for that lovely introduction. And hello to all our viewers or listeners joining us today. Um, it's practically the middle of the week. Well, it's middle of the week for me here, and you're just about a few hours behind, I guess. But it's really encouraging to have all of you sign up. And this has been what now, 5 years running. And when we meet you, when you come on travels with us, a lot of us, a lot of you recognize us from webinars, and it's really encouraging. And in fact, that's kind of been like the inspiration for the series of topics that I've been doing. Is that we talk about a lot of stuff during our travels when you travel with one of us here, and sometimes those conversations lead to something else, and then we're like, okay, maybe this is a good topic to cover. And that's what I've been doing over the past few episodes, is picking and choosing topics that are of interest, something that can supplement your travel, but not only that, but sort of inspired by some of the questions you ask. And so for today, I'm going to be talking to you about courtship and rituals in the wild. Now, we have, Nat Hab has trips all across the world, and I'm sure as regular travelers, you have witnessed some of these wonderful moments of natural history right out there, right live. And in Asia, at the moment, we are going through a transition. The season is changing. Most parts of Asia are now getting into spring, and it is a great time because not only there's a burst of color with a lot of blossoms coming in, trees are coming out, plants are blossoming with flowers, some are shedding the leaves in preparation of the dry season, but it is also a season of great activity. Now, uh, you will notice when you travel here, in fact, we were just talking about it before we opened the webinar, is that most parts of Asia right now, with the streak of warm weather that is coming through, starts to flower. And with that brings a whole activity with the birds, there's a whole activity with insects, and all of this, there seems to be this huge sort of culmination, this huge peak of activity where animals are trying to get as much as they can in preparation for the season of calving, birthing, reproduction, everything that happens in a few months from now. So, at this point of time, I'd like to get into a few of these rituals, a few of the interesting courtship displays, interesting animal behavior that you would encounter if you were traveling with us at this point of time. Now, for the sake of this webinar, yes, I will focus a lot on courtships and relationships, but also apart from well, also non-reproductive relationships, something that is very common or very dominant at this point of time. So, why am I doing this? Why am I talking about this? Well, it's I think it's important to highlight animal relationships. It's all fun to go out and watch these animals, and I know you are here because you enjoy observing wildlife, you enjoy watching animals in the wild. But it's also important to sort of pause and think what is going on behind what that animal is doing. We will talk about mating and courtship of well, several interesting um, phenomenon that happens in the natural world across the world. I'd like to dwell a little bit on nesting and parenting, and also a little bit of the science behind this whole process. So, I think at the very base of this is a question that we must ask ourselves, or we have already asked, is do animals actually form relationships? Are they capable of relationships? Yes, we've seen that evident with some mammals and birds, whether it's a pairing up for lifetime or the relationship between a mother and a calf. So there is some sort of bond that is formed. There is some sort of a higher plane of existence that between two organisms. But then, is it only related to the higher mammals? Is it only related to higher life forms? Um, and which we shall find out. Now, when we look at relationships um, in the natural world, specifically with the animal kingdom, there are about five species or five types of relationships that exist between species, right? So mutualism is something that we're all familiar with. This could be a relationship between two non-related organisms. They're not of the same species, but something that is mutually beneficial for both, like the clownfish and the sea anemone. They cohabit together. They're completely different species. One benefits from the other through cleaning and gleaning and be able to absorb tiny bits of food, and the other benefits from camouflage and defense. Going down, predation is something that again all of us are familiar with. This is albeit a very one-sided relationship where one organism depends on the other for food, which results in the demise of the other organism. Competition is a more interesting phase, and I have spoken about this in another webinar, and I know a couple of my colleagues have also spoken at great lengths. Is a relationship between two species. Again, they need not be of the same kingdom, but something where one species evolves defense mechanisms to combat the predation from the other species. But and there's also this kind of it leads into an arms race where one develops a system, the other overcomes a system, and then and it keeps going higher and higher. So here we have the acacia tree and the giraffe. Giraffes essentially have developed a long neck to feed on the tallest acacia. The acacia then releases sort of a chemical warfare to combat that. But then the giraffe also has certain resistance to certain of the alkaloids in the acacia, which they're able to feed. So while most of the tree remains unavailable for many animals, the giraffe is still one of the creatures that can feed at the top. So this is kind of like a one step over the other that develops over time. Parasitism, I think anyone who has swatted a mosquito on your arm knows what this is. Again, a bit of a one-sided relationship where the well-being of one depends on the detriment of the other. The host is often at the receiving end. It and may not result in the death of the host, but in most cases it does, and in some cases it is just very. I mean, could be other factors such as illnesses or sometimes nothing at all. Now, commensalism is something again that is mutually beneficial. May not always have a very two-sided relationship, but the benefit of one does not lead to the detriment of the other. So, between species, when we look at it, there's always an interaction, and this is something that I wanted to throw out there, so just that we get our terms right and understand the various stages. So, species communicate with each other, species interact with each other through the natural world. It could be bacteria and animals, it could be plants and bacteria, it could be plants and animals, and so on and so forth. Now, intraspecies, that is, behavior within the same species, is something that we are probably more familiar with, and it's a little bit more obvious that relationships are extended beyond just food and defense, but also into reproduction, into parenting, and in some species we see very, very strong family bonds. So, on that note, having laid the introduction, I'd like to go into something which is, I mean, it fascinates me, which is why I like to talk about it because some animals have very, very elaborate systems of dealing with it. Some of it is more matter of fact, done in a couple of seconds and then you move on with life. But it is this interesting behavior that which I find fascinating and I love to talk about it, especially when we're out on safaris and so on. And that is mating and courtship. Now, there is a lot more than just what we see in the physical realm with mating and courtship. Um, it engages a lot of senses. smell, taste, chemical compounds in the air called pheromones, and also as warnings for danger and so on and so forth. So let's look at how all of these things interact with one another. Excuse me. Now, if you travel to India or to the Indian subcontinent, a very, very familiar sight that you're often greeted with. Sometimes the first sight that you're greeted with is a courtship or the courtship ritual of the peacocks. Now, on most of our safaris in India, you have a good chance of seeing these peacocks, whether it's the tiger quest that happens in Ranthambore or the Grand India Tour or our Nepal and Bhutan experience where you watch the peacocks dancing in the grassland. But you know that the thing that the peacock is most renowned for is actually a courtship ritual. Now, the male peacocks shed their feathers every year. It grows back sometimes within the same season, sometimes it doesn't. And that's an important part of their courtship ritual. You'll often find them dancing, trying to attract the attention of females, the peahens that are around. And usually, if you see a peacock displaying, you know there are females around. Sometimes males will also display to each other as sort of in terms of a like a practice, a sort of trial run before the actual show. And you'll find a group of peacocks because peahens are generally social, whereas males tend to hang out on their own. Now, the plumage is quite exquisite, and they do these things much like turkeys because they're the same group of birds that they rattle their feathers, and the feathers of the peacock have multiple scales on them that catch the light and make this display very, very elaborate. And they use everything from not just their tail feathers but everything extending from calls to very, very raucous wide calls, to the wings. That they have these chestnut brown wings which they rattle, the position of the tail, the position of the head, and the crest and everything. So it is a riot of color to watch a peacock and in its display forefront. And this is the time where they actually start. So in India, there's actually a folklore that says that the moment the peacock starts calling, the moment it starts displaying, it is signaling the arrival of the monsoon. So by March or April, when spring is at its peak and before the summer, you'll see a lot of this courtship display happening and a lot of calls happening, which indicates the monsoon is coming in a few months. Now, while a peacock may be flamboyant, I don't think in terms of competition it holds a candle to what we know from the birds of paradise. Now, these are birds that are renowned for their very, very elaborate display. There are about, I think, if I remember rightly, about 45 species of birds of paradise found across Australasia, mostly in Papua New Guinea and parts of Eastern Australia. And these birds are some of the best display in terms of courtship, which is there. So the males are very, very brightly colored. The females are a little bit more drab. And if you've watched videos, and I would suggest watch David Attenborough's video on the birds of paradise. It's a beautiful documentation of their elaborate behaviors. Now, these birds are forested birds. They live in moist forest or rainforest and therefore have to be seen. Now, peacocks, on the other hand, will inhabit the open and it's easy to have visuals on them, which females can easily identify. Whereas these birds, on the other hand, one of the reasons why they have such an elaborate display is because they need to be seen. Now, in the dense canopy or in the dense undergrowth, it's very hard for a female to pick out. So, as an animal, as a visually oriented organism, you need to look for movement, and this is something that all of us have used, especially if you're out on safari in Central or South America or in Asia. You know that movement is the first thing that catches your eye before you zone in on that animal or get a picture of that animal that you're looking at. So there is a lot of motion that is involved for these birds, and so while they're there, one of the other theories is that because these birds lack natural predators and because they have plentiful food. Now, consider this is in a tropical forest. They're mainly frugivores. They also supplement their diets with insects and so on. But there is plenty to go around, right? And because they've not had any pressure for foraging, there's no pressure from predators. One of the theories is that they've developed this um, elaborate system, which, when survival is easy, think of it this way: when survival is easy, it's easy to develop other traits where you can, sort of spend your energy on. Now, take that to animals that cohabit in the tundra regions or the desert. Things tend to be, or behavior tends to be, a little bit more functional. Here, when there is no pressure of food and you couple that with the need to be seen, it results in a lot of these sort of a more flamboyant, or a more sort of more flamboyant traits, which they can focus their energy on. Now, the beauty of these birds is that they put up a song and dance, and often the courtship of this, or the actual display, lasts much longer than the actual sort of copulation itself. And so through the season, they develop this plumage. There's these displays that go on sometimes for weeks, and when a female finds them attractive, the deed is done within a few minutes, and then the generation carries on. um, so it's not so much about survival of the fittest here, but it's more about who's got the best dance moves and the best song and dance routine to sort of ensure its genes. A good picture here for you here is, if you look at the bottom right of the image, you see the female. She's lower down. She's more drab colored, where the male on top is more brilliant. Now, we all know cats can have quite a loud, or quite a raucous mating ritual. If you've watched lions in Africa, or if you've watched tigers in India, you know that mating actually lasts for a few days, and it can be multiple times in a day. Lions are known to go at it at about 25 or 30 times in a day, and usually the males and females pair up for about 5 or 6 days, a week almost, and the only thing on their mind is mating. They don't hunt sometimes, or it dropped down a little bit. Leopards have known to hunt together. Tigers have known to hunt together, and but they stay together just for those 5 days and throughout. Now, the background to this is that, so females go into easters. They mark the territory. The males get a whiff of that scent. They approach the female, and a lot of it is through vocalizations. And so there is posturing, there is vocalizations, and few weeks ago we were very lucky on one of our Indian trips to watch the male and female tiger go at it, and it was beautiful to watch because the female often will assume a submissive position, and the male will approach. And if she doesn't like the look of him, she can get very, very aggressive. But when she finally allows the male to go, then the male assumes the role of the aggressor. There's a lot of scratching and biting and all of that goes into the whole act itself. Now, just to give you another dimension to this, I have an audio recording of lions in heat. Now, there are wonderful studies done on vocalizations, trying to understand what each means. A lot of low rumbles signify acceptance and content with some of the big cats, where they're able to kind of signal to the mate that it's okay, and they're accepting of it. And of course, during the heat of the moment, sometimes it can get very, very vocal. Now they have a large range, and if you're contemplating going to Africa, seeing lions in Africa, I think is one of the crowning um, glories of the whole trip. And they are not shy. I can tell you this: they are not shy. They will often come up to jeeps and allow you to actually play a voyeur while they go about their business. Now, going back, this is shifting continents again. This is a series of images. This is actually from a previous trip, but I want to tell you a story on the similar note of something that we witnessed last month. Was these two female leopards actually, which decided to approach a male leopard, and this was in central India, and we had very good sightings. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures, so I had to borrow this from a friend. And was these two females. As you can see, they approached the male, starting with the top left. They're much markedly smaller than the males. There is a lot of vocalizations that leopards do as well, which I'll show you in a second. But they will call out to each other when a female's on heat. She will vocalize, a male will respond, and so on. But this particular situation, there were two females in the area, and one of them came up. The male was on the rock, sitting there, serving his kingdom. And one of the females came up, and they kind of posture. They also let the male smell them. They let out a scent, and they rub their the back quarters on the male almost in front of them, and almost nuzzle up. Now, if the male is willing, he will then take the female. But in this case, there was this one female. Another female came into the picture. The first one ran off. The second one came in. Male didn't like the look of the second one, and they went back to the first one. So it was this fantastic moment to watch over a period of what it was about 45 minutes that we saw them, and the male finally decided to mate with the initial female that came through. And if you've heard vocalizations and you thought the lions were loud, I'll have news for you. Amongst the cats, given size to sound ratio, I think leopards by far are the most guttural. They're the most loudest of the lot. You don't expect a smaller cat or a cat that size to emit such a large sound. And to prove my point, here we go. Now, this sound has been described by many, many people as a raspy sound, a sound like you're sawing wood. But if you're out there and you feel it, and it's truly a special experience, you feel the sound deep inside your soul. It is so guttural. It's has so much of reverberations. Um, when you're out there, it really resonates like deep in within your belly, and it's really really loud. And it's I hope there's opportunity when you travel is to look out and if you hear the sound on one of your travels. Um, Another thing that cats do, I briefly mentioned, to signal their readiness, they also spray. Now, there is this thing in the animal kingdom called the phlegm response. You might have seen deer, especially, roll their lips up, and cats do that too. This tigress here is doing her phlegm response. Uh, what they're essentially doing is they are picking up chemicals in the air uh, by pursing the lips, by exposing a particular organ that we have in the roof of our mouths called the Jacobson's organ. Now, amongst most of the organisms, snakes use them the most because they rely on chemical maps. Some mammals use them too. Humans, we have the organ, but it's more like a vestigial organ for us. We don't really use it that much, except to detect some pheromones. Most of our pheromones are detected in our nose as well, and that's what they do. They pick up these chemical signatures from the air, translate it to the Jacobson's organ, and get information from there. So females will spray when they're getting into estrus. They also spray to mark the territory, male spray to mark the territory as well. So those chemical signatures can have various purposes. So and in context where we're talking about now, a lot of it will symbolize readiness or the willingness to mate. So interestingly, for females, once the cubs are weaned and she is ready, she has a very different scent signature, which is what, as you see in the previous slide, they will spray on bushes and trees, low-lying trees, so the potential mates can pick up that smell. Now, you should, if you haven't thought of it already or you haven't traveled to India yet, some of the best places to see tigers and actual behavior is on our summer photo trips that we run to Ranthambore National Park and in central India. Gives you a chance to watch these cats, these elusive cats, and in most cases we are rewarded with very open sightings of viewings where they come out and do go about their daily business. So I was talking about the Fleming response here. It's not just restricted to cats. Deer do this too. This is the spotted deer, the most prolific deer in the subcontinent. As you can see, this is a herd behind. The males, again, this is the time where they are rubbing off the velvet from their antlers, the antlers that come out in all its glory. It's nice and shiny, and they're looking out for potential mates. And you'd often see them mingling into the herds, sniffing out potential females for them to procreate. Now, here again, it is just to illustrate the point. This is a pair of sambar deer. They're the largest deer in Asia. And sambar deer, interestingly, amongst compared to the other species, also have a lot of scent glands, more than the spotted deer, in fact. So they leave a lot more scent signatures around. And again, it's a forested deer. So imagine you searching for a potential mate amongst tree cover. It's not an easy task, so they have to leave a lot more scent signatures around. They have scent glands on their legs, they have scent glands near their eyes, they have scent glands near their throat. All of this, which they will rub against certain things to leave a scent, and it's those scents that. When those chemicals are rubbed on a particular surface, it aerosolizes, it travels, and you'll also notice that many animals, as they follow their same paths which they follow, they keep sniffing the ground. So, courtship and rituals is not just about the visuals; it's also about a hidden sense signature that often we, as viewers, can't detect or see. But there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. And I think it lends a new sort of dimension to when you say love is in the air. It literally, love chemicals are in the air for those who are ready to pick it up. Now, so- something that is one of the most wonderful phenomenon in the natural world is the migration of the monarch butterfly. So each year, these butterflies migrate from southeastern Canada all the way down to the forest of Mexico, and it's one of the most documented things. Nat have beautiful trips that run there. Some of you might have even done these trips, and it's all the more pertinent. First of all, it's hard to comprehend that a simple organism such as a butterfly, an invertebrate, can actually undertake these migrations. And when you put it in perspective of things such as changing climate, land conversion, environmental degradation, and so on, it makes this phenomenon all the more special. But I'm not here to talk about the migration. I'm here to talk about something that goes beyond that. Now, we've been talking about pheromones quite a bit. Now, pheromones is a chemical that is secreted by one organism to promote a kind of behavior in the organism, other organism. In this case, it is for copulation. So, one organism, usually the males, will secrete, which will then um, sort of elicit a female to accept. And in the case of the monarch butterflies, they have these these thin pencil-like structures, which almost like paint brushes that come on the side of the thorax, which they use to attract the females. Now, you know that the monarch butterfly feeds on a lot of plants that are very, very high in alkaloids. Some of these plants are toxic to most organisms, other organisms, and by that extension, the monarchs themselves are toxic to many organisms, which and many birds that can't feed on them. Now, these insects feed off these plants. They accumulate small quantities of these alkaloids, and they conceal it on either side of the abdomen in these little hair-like structures that are basically modified scales that come out. And you can see the top left, the male has got these two structures that are around them, in which he does. So they hold it in little pockets on the side of the wings, and whenever he sees a female, they will then release it out of their pockets. These brushes come out, and when during this release process there is a bit of friction. And if you know, butterflies are actually covered with tiny scales. Now, these alkaloids, these chemicals attach themselves to the scales, and when these things are released, they spread in the air, and the female then is able to receive them through an antenna and then translate the message that the male is trying to give. So there's this whole uh, thing that happens on a micro level that often escapes our naked eye. But understanding this, and this blew my mind when I was looking up when I was researching for this presentation, that they're able to do these things. You often see butterflies displaying, but unless you actually observe them through a high powered lens, you actually don't know that's happening, which makes this image such a beautiful image, because you can actually see the male in his full display. Female is sitting, she's feeding, she picks up those chemicals, which is a chemical signature, and the odor or the pheromone, and the female interprets that and decides whether she wants to or she permits the male to copulate with her or not. So the sorry, I was going to show you a yeah. So that's a little close up of those hair-like structures, which the male literally just dusts like little pixie dust or fairy dust upon the female's antenna, sort of inviting her to be his bride. Now, going below the surface, going below land, in under the sea, there are also very, very interesting processes that take place. Now, with a lot of animals, with a lot of invertebrates, much of the fertilization is external. And so, in the case of sea urchins and marine worms, they actually have to coordinate the release. Because imagine a male organism has to release its sperm upon the female, and this is done underwater. And so you all you get is a very, very narrow window in which the sperm is viable. So when a female comes and is ready to release her eggs, the males will have to coordinate. And of course, like with most cases in the natural world, only the best sperm survives. So there has to be a coordinated time where the female releases her eggs, the male releases the sperm that is still viable. Both meet, and then the female stores them. So coordination, therefore, it gives you a selective advantage. And if you're an uncoordinated individual, unfortunately, your seed will not uh, go on. You have much less chance of doing that, and hence, no chance of leaving an offspring. So yeah, it's a fascinating study. We often overlook a lot of these things. It's not easy. It's not easy to do this, and it's easier said than done. So with these fascinating things going on, there's various systems of mating. But one thing that I wanted to highlight again is of an animal that absolutely has no limbs. This is something that you could relate to. So a lot of snakes. While it's hard enough to think about how do snakes mate, this is not a picture of snakes mating. Now, this is something more than that. This is an old picture. It's an old film picture which I took many, many years ago of two king cobras. Initially, I thought they were mating, but then later research and study showed me that these are actually two males locked in combat. Now, you would often, when you say males combating for the right of a female, will often take you back to medieval times or Western duels, something that humans can relate to. But in the animal kingdom, this happens often as well. Males often have to outcompete each other. We've seen that with large cats, we've seen that with bull elephants, we've seen that with some invertebrates and so on. But snakes do that too. Now, this is an interesting process. King cobras are very, very territorial. They are the largest venomous snake in the world. These two handsome hunks we've seen here, we look here, are about 12 feet long. And they were locked in this battle, which lasted for about an hour. Considering it's an animal that expends a lot of energy easily and is cold blooded, that takes a lot of strength and effort. What the males do is they sort of coil and have this kind of wrestling match between themselves where one male tries to subdue the other male. Now, the victor gets rights to the area, the victor gets rights to any females that are in the area, and the loser will have to leave. So, this actually, you might think two of the largest snake, one of the largest snakes in the world, the largest venomous snake for sure, but it is actually a very, very gentlemanly fight. You see them trying to just push each other down like wrestling or judo, and there's never any biting, there's never any hissing, no eye gouging, no fish hooking, nothing of that sort. It's just one male trying to subdue the other, and they go in this coil that try and push the other one down. This was a fantastic sight, and we sat and watched it for about an hour, and eventually one male left the area and the other moved on. So there seems to be an agreement. They know who's the victor, who's the loser, and yeah, for being a deadly snake, I say the fight is very, very gentlemanlike. Now, speaking of snakes, now while this is not directly related to copulation itself, but there is an interesting phenomenon, and this has been observed in garter snakes in Northern America, that there seems to be this communal living process that they have. Now, it was earlier noted that during winters, especially after snow, they all live together to kind of conserve, heat or during those times. But then it's also been seen that they cohabit together in this big writhing ball of coils during other times of the year. Now, there's been studies done on the garter snakes, and they still haven't understood whether this is just a communal living or does it have to do anything with success of finding a female. And as you know, with a lot of reptiles, females can um, produce viable eggs without having copulated, and sometimes they can produce through several copulations with several individuals. So it is not understood yet, but I just thought it was an interesting phenomenon to throw up there, since we were talking about courtships and rituals and all of that. These snakes actually live together, and a study has shown in a controlled environment, they show that snakes actually choose kind of comrades or friends who they want to hang out with during this point of time. So it was a study done in a lab where they separated these snakes. All of them were marked, and they were put in different corners. They cleaned the enclosures out to make sure there's no chemical trails, and they've always found that the same individuals actively seeked out each other to kind of hang out. So whether it's the bros trying to wingman each other out into finding the best mate, picking up a lady in the bar, we don't know. A lot more is there to be studied and understood for these animals. Speaking of picking up chicks, I like to go to the rhinos that we have in Eastern India and in Nepal as well. Now, I've just come back from a trip in Nepal and heading there again at the end of the month. Watching rhinos there is absolutely fantastic. They're a bit clumsy sometimes. They're funny animals. They're huge. They look mean. They look imposing, but sometimes are absolutely funny. And one of the things which I find extremely laughable at, or which always brings a smile to a face, the moment a rhino emerges from the grassland. the moment it emerges from the water, it will straight walk up to a pile of dung and smell it. Now, these are known, rhinos across the world do it, both African and Asian rhinos. And this is again because of chemicals. Now, rhinos have not so great eyesight, but they do have a very, very strong sense of smell. So, and as you see from the larger picture here, when they poop, they make a huge pile of dung. They often return to the same pile and will poop on top. Now, these big dung piles or latrines or rhino latrines, as we call them, are called middens. Sometimes can be a few feet across and they're massive, and they will always do it in the same place. Now, the reason why they do this is because they are leaving a chemical signature and they are picking up also a chemical trail. I like to call it rhino social media, where you're able to see what state your competitors in, whether female's on heat, whether she's ready, if your competitor is bigger than you, if he's healthier than you, um, if what is the health conditions of, or is the female with calves around. All of these things you're able to see and leave a message for yourself. So it's like Facebook, it's like Tinder, especially if you're a single male looking out for a viable female. You will have to go to that dung pile and sniff it out to see if there's any forthcoming ladies around the region. Now, we've spoken a lot about chemicals, we've spoken a lot about visual clues. Again, but there's something, like I said, it engages all senses. When courtship, a lot of it is on auditory clues as well. Now, we're all familiar with birds in our backyard. We all know the chirpings they do. It's a huge communication that goes on. It's a very complex communication, everything from social structures to parents calling out to their kids or to just calling out to members of their own tribe. All of this is there. And but there's one particular bird called the white bell bird that lives in the Amazon that uses acoustics to actually attract a female. Now, why this particular bird? I'll tell you in a second. This is this is the loudest call for a bird ever recorded. Now, earlier the record was held by the screaming piha, which I'm going to show to you in a second. But the white bellbird has now got the highest call. It can clock at about 125 decibels, which is astonishing for a bird about yay big. Just to give you perspective, you see that scale at the bottom. Normal human conversation is about 60 decibels. I am talking right now at 55 decibels. A jet engine is 140 decibels at takeoff, and this bird can clock 120. Now, how it does it, I'll tell you in just a sec, but I'll let you hear the call first. Now, I actually had to tone the volume down because I don't want to wake up the neighbors here. I toned it down, but it is a really loud call as well. And how a small bird is able to emit this call, not only does it has a large vocal capacity, and you can see the mouth is very, very large, but they also have structural enhancements on their chest that helps them do it. So they have, I mean, if you look at this bird right now, it's built. It's almost got a six pack or two pack in this case. But they have they have thicker, much larger and thicker tissues on the chest cavity, on the sternum, where they're able to compress the sound and make it. Now, you would think, okay, if a sound that loud, where does the female got to be? Is he going to blow her feathers off? Is he going to make her deaf? Or are the females deaf in the species? They have a very interesting courtship, and again, researchers have studied that. And when you see, so they actually prop up on a branch right next to this female and will scream their lungs out at the female. Uh, and it is known that the females about a meter away, once they start their little repertoire going, for a fraction of a second, he swivels his head the opposite side and the female swivels her head the opposite side. So he's not blowing directly into her and causing her eardrums to burst, but the males and the females, just for that fractional second where he makes the call, turn away from each other, and so where the higher note is away and the second note actually goes right in the face. So they have one. I think there is an ongoing study to check the female's auditory capacity and what she's able to perceive, and I'm very interested to find out what happens. So there's this thing. There's a lot of hopping, and they're right at the top of the canopy. I've seen videos of them. You can look it up online as well. There's a lot of hopping around, and just when they call, they kind of separate and then come back together. So yeah, it is a fascinating thing. Now, going back to what was thought was the largest is a screaming piha. Now, again, this only measures at a mere 116 decibels, which is not as loud as a jet engine, but still pretty darn loud. Again, this is found in the Amazon and the Atlantic forests of northern South America, and they're there in the lower parts of the canopy across Venezuela and the Andean foothills. Again, it's a fantastic bird. Again, going back to a fact that canopy birds, forest birds, need to be noticed. Sometimes it's movement that attracts the mate, and in this case, it is the astonishing acoustic repertoire. And here's the call of the piha. The first time I heard this call, I was taken back to those old retro cartoons of the wolf whistles, um, well, at a bar or at a nightclub, because it's almost just like that. It goes like wee wee, and it's just like a wolf whistle. A funny bird, funny bird. The other, I mean, since we're talking about birds in the Amazon, I cannot without talking about the cock of the rock. Now, many of you, if you've traveled in Peru and Cusco, they like to hang out socially. Uh, these males, and all they ever do is display to attract the female, and they congregate in these huge groups called leks, where they challenge each rival and to a dance off, and that's what they do. So no violence, no nothing, no posturing. It's just guys with their shiny leather jackets and their fancy cars dancing off with each other to compete. Um, it is regarded as a confrontation in the bird world, but thankfully this confrontation only ends with some really spectacular moves and no violence at all. Um, Usually the males are all hanging out there again, because my imagination is such. I'm thinking of old movies from the 50s and 60s where guys in leather jackets all lined up there in the parking lot. Female walks by, the posturing gets a little bit more intense. There's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of jeering and squawking and all of that, and apparently the females like it, and they choose one, and the male walks off with the female to do the deed and ensure the survival of the next generation. So it seems to work in the bird world. I can't comment whether it does in our world. So moving on to other kinds of relationships, I just briefly get into nesting and parenting. I know we're getting close to the hour, uh, but again, this is something that is absolutely fantastic. It is a form of love, in a sense, and for me, nothing illustrates this more than the great hornbills that we have in Asia. Now, all of you might be familiar with emperor penguins and how the parents take turns months without eating, They go back and forth and so on. But the hornbills are no less. Now, these are massive birds. They stand about almost 3 feet tall. They're big, heavy birds. Their canopy they feed on fruits, so therefore they like mature forests, and we often see them in the mornings flying from a forest patch to a feeding patch and back. Now, their interesting behavior, which starts again in a few months, is that the female will they will find a tree hollow, which is why they like the mature forest. So a large tree, usually high up in the canopy, will find a tree hollow where the female will then enclose herself in. Now, not only does she go inside the hole, she loses all her feathers. The males will use a combination of clay and feces and cement the female up in the hollow, and all they left is with a very very tiny crack to which he brings her food. Now, hornbill pairs are known to last over several generations. At this point, the female is completely vulnerable. You'll see hornbills where they're mostly fruit eaters, but at this point of time, they will also supplement it with proteins such as snakes and lizards and sometimes crabs and so on. And the male will bring the food to the female while she lays eggs, incubates the eggs, and the hatchlings are ready to emerge. So this period can take up to 2.5 months, and during this time, the female is completely at the dependent on the male, and the males. The only time you'll see hornbill solitary is when the male's traveling back and forth with food for the female. Now, this all the more brings into perspective how important it is to to ensure this. Parts of Southeast Asia, hornbills were hunted earlier for their brilliant feathers and the casques, and often when a male is hunted, it results in the death of the female and the young ones as well, because he right now is the sole provider for the family, a role that we're kind of familiar with. So there has been an active movement across a lot of Southeast Asia, including India, Nepal, and so on, where the hunting of hornbills has almost stopped. So any minor change or any damage to the male or um, any adverse effect on the male can affect the entire brood itself, and it's usually hornbills will breed once a year and often two eggs only. So it is an interesting and a very very tender sort of behavior to notice in the wild. When it goes off, moving to the other side of the world now with the Galapagos sea lions. These are uh, the smallest sea lions in the world, and here parenting is more of a community involvement. Mothers tend to know, as you know, they'll all the nurseries around on the beach. Usually, there is one male in charge of his little harem that he has. Mothers tend to know the calls of the sea lions right from day one. So only the young ones really vocalize, and then the males too. And they all have distinct barks as well. And then they can pinpoint which is their kid amongst a group colony of, say 30 or 40 sea lions that go there. Now, the average bull, and they all take turns to monitor the harem. The average bull holds his territory only for a few months, because during the time he is so busy defending his colony that he barely gets a chance to eat. So he is so with great power comes great responsibility, as the saying goes. So as the responsible sort of patriarch or the godfather of the whole family, he becomes severely weak, and then has to invariably loses his position to another young male who is stronger than him, who then will take the position, and then the cycle continues. So with responsibility comes obviously at a great personal loss, but it seems to all work well in their world, where each one takes and protects the harem. Now, moving on to other parental relationships, coming swinging back to Asia, where we look about how important these bonds are there to develop social characteristics. And one of the best things, or the best ways to look at this is, or to see this in, is with orangutans. Now, The males, the more larger, they're the more sort of brightly colored ones. They have these huge cheek phalanges which make them look imposing. But that's pretty much all that the males do. Once they breed, they leave, and then the entire parenting is done by the mother. Now, young ones can live with the mothers almost up to the age of 11, and they start that after, when they start dispersing and establish their own territories. Females of the same family or the same generations tend to stick around near each other, whereas males tend to disperse further to set up their own families. And so there is sort of a connection between several females, mothers, daughters, siblings, aunts, and so on. Excuse me. One of the most important things that a young one learns from their mother is nest building. Now, orangutans make these little nests which they use it to kind of like lounge areas to hang out on top of canopies, and that's an important skill that is taught. The use of tools are taught by mothers to their children, how to fish out termites, how to use twigs, and so on. And these are the one of the few apes that actually use tools. So it is such an important not only wisdom that is traveled, or important life skills that travel from the mother to the child, something that is pretty much unheard of in the animal kingdom, or sometimes we just overlook, and which is all the more pertinent why these animals need to have their habitat preserved, why older ones need to be given that freedom so they're able to teach the young ones new skills. A very interesting study in India, not with the orangutans, but with leopards, found that a lot of leopards, because of the conflict that was happening in a couple of regions, were being captured or shot because when they become man eaters. And they found that the next generation of leopards were actually coming up with zero fear of humans because they had no one to learn from. And so that has exacerbated the problem, and because we have overlooked, also as not just general members, but also experts in the field have overlooked. There's so much of wisdom, so much of skills that are passed from generation to generation, and which is why it's important to have that the whole period of growth and childhood with the parent, or within a social structure, so you're able to learn these skills. Speaking of social structures, one of the most where you see this most dominant is also in Asian elephants. Um, if you watched Jungle Book, you've seen Colonel Hathi leading the charge, giving the rules. That is actually not true. In elephants, especially in Asian elephants, the females are the ones that are charged. Big Mama is in charge. She's the matriarch. She runs the herd. She tells everyone what to do. And usually you'll see multi generational females in there. It is a very, very strong social unit, completely run by women. And I also want to pause at this point of time and give a shout out to all the super moms and women out there on occasion of Women's Day that is coming in a few days. So this truly is symbolizes what a structure is when you don't have males in there. The upbringing, care, nurturing, all of that is done. And again, elephants communicate so well with each other. They're so emotive in their body language. They use a lot of sounds to communicate, some of them subsonic, and they also use a lot of chemical trails, chemical signatures or chemical messages as well to communicate amongst themselves. So it is really strong unit. Again, if you want to watch elephants in the wild, a great place to come through is on our Grand India trip, where you see them out on in a couple of parks. Watch them how they tend to the young, watch them how they protect the young, and watch the young how they also pick up certain things from the adults as well. So this again, on I just like to end on this note that a lot of relationships exist in the wild. A lot of behavior that we see, especially in mammals and birds, which are the most obvious of ones, we could learn from. But it's also so important to sit while you're out there observing nature. And it could be on a safari, it could be in your own backyard. Seeing an animal, identifying them is one thing, But when you sit and observe their behavior a little bit more closely, this could be birds on your feeder in your backyard. But when you start observing their behavior, it opens up a whole new world and a whole new understanding of what these animals are doing. And I just like to close by saying, take that moment to observe them more deeply, try and understand what's going on within the head, and to get a better understanding of how the world around us works. So, on that note, Rob, I'd like to turn it back to you and to hear from our viewers if they have any thoughts or comments that they would like to share with us.
All right, thank you, Conan. Now, if there are any questions, I would like to remind you that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. Just go to those three bars in your upper right corner, click on that, and click on questions. You can stick them in there. Yeah, did you say that peacocks and turkeys are related?
They kind of are the same group. So you have, even though they're worlds apart, you have New World, Old World, but pheasants, peacocks, turkeys are all sort of in the same group of birds, we see.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well,
Uh,
there's very sorry. Just on that note, having worked on a farm for a little bit, I had the chance to observe a few turkeys, and the first time I saw one, I couldn't help but notice how similar they are in peacocks. Two peacocks, they do the same sort of ruffle of feathers that they do. They have different calls, but the kind of the same idea behind a call and a chirp. You know, the little wobble that the gobble that the turkeys do. Peacocks have something similar as well, but the whole tail up display with the wings and that little shake that they do is so much similar when you put the two of them together.
Great. Thank you for that. We
Yeah.
appreciate those details. It doesn't look like we have any more questions today, Conan. So I'm gonna have you throw us some closing comments before we end it today.
Sure. Thank you very much. Well, I hope this was entertaining for you. For us, I mean, for me personally, it's a fascinating subject that I like to pick on, and we are constantly looking at these subjects to keep you entertained. It is very uplifting to hear sounds in the wild when we are there, whether it's songbirds or soothing whale sounds. It is interesting to watch the wonderful display of butterflies as they sort of flit through the air, to see animals doing what they do. And all I want to say is keep traveling. When you travel to these places, you support an entire invisible system that promotes the preservation of these animals. Also, when you travel, uh, keep your eyes open for anything interesting that happens out there. Take that moment to stop, to observe, and to photograph, to video, to engage with the natural world in some way, not just go out, see animals, tick them off on a list, and so on. I know by general, our Nat Hab travelers are great. They have great questions, they have great thoughts and comments when we're out there. But take that moment to observe a little bit more deeply. You'll be surprised, and you'll be entertained by what happens out there. So thank you for joining me today. We hope to see you this side and go see some cool animals out together.
Conan, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. We're gonna keep our eyes open. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. And if you're part of a photo club and you would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. And now join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll
Goodbye.
see you next time.